Arsenal's victory in the North London derby felt significant for a number of reasons. As Arteta said, it showcased the team's thick skin, not letting any narratives of being underprepared without key figures disturb them, but also because the game forced Arteta to adapt, not just manage and get by with absentees, but genuinely adapt the team's dynamics. And in today's video, we're going to break down just how Arsenal's out-of-possession structures stifled Spurs so much, whilst also taking a glance about how Spurs could have manufactured space a bit better, but significantly, we're going to delve into what was a new Arsenal in possession, focusing on changes in structure, Timber's connectivity in the team, Havertz and Trossard's relationship, and many more details along the way. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once more. And with all this to come, we're going to start with Arteta's suffocating out of possession approach and how there was much more to it than just sitting back. This passage of play here perfectly sums up Arsenal's intentions in their press. They are set up initially in their 4-4-2 mid-block with Saka and Martinelli stuck tight to the inverted fullbacks in Porro and Udogie. Partey is tracking Maddison and Jorginho is managing Kulusevski. Arsenal's front two arguably had the most critical roles in this press though. Trossard and Havertz had to apply pressure to the two centre-backs whilst blocking the passing lane into Bentancur, who is essentially free if he's found in the number 6. But this is where Arteta's structure and the intelligence and work ethic of the players were tremendous. As spoken about in our tactical preview, Spurs are really steadfast in how they use their nominal 2-3-5 shape across the thirds, and the narrowness of the inverted fullbacks allowed this Arsenal shape, a mid-block mixed with man marking, to shut off access through the lines and protect the space around the centre, covering the legs or the lack of legs in Jorginho and Partey. But like I said, Arsenal did not just sit off, and at every possible moment they looked to jump with maximum aggression and transition into a man-to-man press. Here, Vicario joins the build-up, stretching the Arsenal front two enough to access Bentancur, but look at Jorginho. He has already anticipated this and adopts this time a position more familiar to Declan Rice's role in Arsenal's out-of-possession setup, triggering the switch to a man-to-man. And Arsenal are such an intelligent team, especially off the ball, and this trigger in how they went to their man-to-man shapes was varied. Here, for example, Saka is the one that jumps onto Van de Ven, blocking the lane to Udogie, with Partey stepping up out to him and Saliba covering this by stepping onto James Maddison. It's true though, the missing legs, especially in that Arsenal midfield, meant that we had to pick our moments, and Maddison was often allowed to drift outside of our shape with him and Bentancur, often the deepest of the Spurs midfield. And this image, I think, surmises a lot of what Spurs' problems in the derby came from on the ball. You have a really disciplined, intelligent and aggressive Arsenal deeper shape, with Saka, for example, willing to let Son go one-on-one against Ben White and instead track Udogie's underlaps. And these underlaps, especially from in the half spaces from Spurs' inverted fullbacks, are a real reliable form of chance creation. These arrivals into space, but Arsenal marshalled the half spaces and the central spaces so well, and without dribblers, with that gravity to suck players in and create spaces elsewhere, Spurs were left with players such as Son, Johnson and Udogie and Kulusevski inside the block, players who like to be released instead. Now, there were examples though, every now and again, of Spurs getting a little bit of joy, and this is what we're going to focus on how you could stretch Arsenal's block a bit more. Spurs' typical rotations, for example the fullbacks and the 8s interchanging high and low, felt predictable and mechanical, and they were really well dealt with by Arsenal. But the more creative off-the-cuff rotations did cause a few more issues. Solanke here rotates with Heung-min Son, allowing Son to dart inside, or Udogie could stay wider and stretch Arsenal's block a bit more, or here Pedro Porro drops down to create a back three, drawing Martinelli out and luring Jorginho into these uncomfortable higher places to follow Kulusevski, who then spins in behind. But ultimately, this is just a handful of moments against an Arsenal side who not only communicate well and work tirelessly to combat these movements, but defend the box so resolutely and remain aggressive in all phases of play. And that aggressiveness is key, because the game was not just about Arsenal off the ball. In fact, for me, the most intriguing aspects of the game was Arteta's change in structure on it. So let's analyse these tactical choices and new dynamics now. Again, going back to that pre-match tactical preview, I discussed Arteta's likely move to that fixed double pivot, having that dual shadow striker false 9 pairing up front, amongst other tweaks. And this was the key against Spurs, setting up in that 4-2-2 or 4-2-4 foundation. Again, the numbers are redundant here, but it gives us a framework to work with. But remember the home games against Liverpool last season, with the intention then of forming this type of shape higher up, with Timber not inverting into the pivot alongside Partey because Jorginho is there in a more fixed pivot, but pushing into these higher left pockets from left back, the same as Kiwior did last season against Liverpool. On the other side, White tucked into the side of the midfield alongside Jorginho and Partey, not overlapping Saka, and this was in order to hit the left hand side with some switches and also helping us squeeze our play more in the final third. But I want to start with Jurrien Timber, given a role freed from the pivot, and he showed in this role just how much upside he can give us in these higher positions when he's given a license to roam and knit that left hand side together really nicely. Let's flesh this out here, because Timber in this example actually becomes the out ball from left back, with Trossard drifting deeper, and then we're going to get onto these movements, and then Gabriel clipping it over the top of that midfield line in Spurs' 4-1-4-1 zone. Timber receives this clip and Trossard now darts into position you would expect to see from Gabriel Martinelli, who has instead pinned Romero in place. I think this showcases a lot of the fluidity of Arsenal's front line with these dynamics, and Timber is found, like we said, free. Trossard and Timber are very cunning, tricky customers, and Trossard's underlap is then mimicked by Jurrien Timber, who ghosts into this region here. And here you see the quality he brings to our final third play, the upside, the associations he strikes up with others, how effortlessly players seem to move off him, and of course that tighter space ability Timber has, the nimbleness to duck inside Bentancur here and get a shot off. Let's take another example. White here has that switch of play and finds Martinelli, who knocks it back into Timber, into those higher midfield inside zones. Things appear in this picture to look locked off, but with a fluid turn, Timber suddenly creates a new angle. He waits for Porro and Johnson to bite, enacts a give and go with Martinelli, and wriggles himself into a dangerous space again. And our left hand side against Spurs felt more connected, more fluid, boasting cleaner rotations with Timber in this freer role. Here, for example, Martinelli hinges lower, Trossard rotates with Timber to get those deeper touches in the build-up we said he likes to do. And this next passage of play is perfect, I think, in demonstrating this, and takes and transitions us to my next point really nicely. This has become here a feature of our on-ball play. When we are forced back by a press, we reorganise ourselves by stretching really wide and in turn trying to disorganise the opposition. Again, stretching really wide, moving to a single pivot with number 8s slightly higher to keep numbers in the build-up, yes, but also give more space for our fullbacks to dart into. Spurs here are trying to transition from their zone into a man-to-man press, but this 4-3-3 really stretches them. Porro can't get out to Jurrien Timber in left back in time. Havertz drops to connect. Romero can't follow him because of Martinelli on the left wing, and Bentancur, who is tasked with following the movements between the lines from Trossard and Kai Havertz, hasn't got across either. Timber knocks it into Kai Havertz, who moves it on to Martinelli, and this is going to be absolutely pivotal now. These counter movements, Timber and Havertz now suddenly both dash high. Martinelli finds Jurrien, and with a better ball, Timber puts it on a plate for someone in the middle. So, counter movements, that phrase, this pivots us nicely into the discussion of Havertz and Trossard. In that shadow striker pairing floating on top of our pivot, there was a big emphasis on how Leandro Trossard and Kai Havertz and the whole team moved off each other as a unit. Largely, Trossard's role was that connector between the lines, especially on the left-hand side, floating behind Havertz often, who was that outball for Raya's long balls. This is a great example. We've got Jorginho facing play and breaking lines from those deeper left centre mid zones. Trossard becomes that between the lines false 90 connector, and he turns and hits a switch to Saka. Here, the whole team has pivoted according to Trossard and Kai Havertz's fluid positioning. This is a better one though. Trossard firstly stretches play in behind, then moves lower, connecting play from Jorginho and triggering Martinelli's movements, counter movements in behind. By the way, Martinelli could have executed this better, of course, but if he took another touch, that means Van de Ven suddenly gets across. Martinelli basically didn't have as much time in this one-on-one chance as people initially thought. Look at the fluidity of this front four though for Arsenal, and Trossard on a day where, of course, we were missing Martin Odegaard, gave us some much needed incision from between the lines, and he keeps showing Trossard in moments that he has that incisive gene to his game that at times extends to these bigger passes, approximating for a lack of bigger range passes we have in the squad at times. Look at the benefits of that here on transition, firing it long to Kai Havertz, who gives us not just a target to hit in the air, but legs in transition too. He is increasingly looking a scary, potent force with these stampeding, relentless and unstoppable in-behind runs. But here, it's not quite that. He's more clever. He waits for Van de Ven to storm across, timing the release of his pass and waiting for Martinelli to make that dart from out to in. Martinelli finds Saka and the rest is history. Saka wins the corner and Gabriel scores from it. So as you can see, this fluid front line also gives us a lot in the transition, and Havertz in general was absolutely superb against Spurs, getting us up the pitch time and time again, whether that was pulling onto Van de Ven or Udogie, creating these flick-on moments to Saka or knockdowns to Trossard just behind him, or these clever movements pulling into space, for example rotating from side to side with Trossard. We had to lean on Havertz as an outlet much more than we would have liked, but I want to focus on when we played through the Spurs press with his link up and clever movement instead. Here it's Havertz's turn to be that connective presence. Trossard has rotated with Timber and Kulusevski leaves Thomas Partey. Now this was a mistake. Timber takes Bentancur away by moving higher as Havertz hinges lower. Van de Ven realises this double movement too late. Trossard receives it from Havertz and switches it to Ben White. Havertz often created these wide overloads, and I think this is the best example. He's rotated with Saka here, actually starting on the touchline. And on a side note, getting Saka and Havertz, these two closer to each other, has been a key detail throughout our season. Here, Havertz knits things together, sucks Spurs in those wide areas, and suddenly the left-hand side looks really underloaded. Jorginho receives it after checking his shoulder and fires it into Timber. Trossard here is hovering in a really awkward to control sort of space, which allows Timber to actually burst down the line, find Martinelli and then underlap himself. You can see how things start to seem so much more connected, even if we didn't have the ball or actually play through the Spurs press hardly as much as we would have wanted at the start of the game. But to finish, I want to look at just a couple of little details, some nice mementos, if you will, to also take from the game. This was one of my favourite passages from the game. White here has been completely penned in, and Raya comes all the way out of his goal in order to offer a route out long. Unsurprisingly, his launch is accurate, and unsurprisingly, Kai Havertz pulls it down. Wins a throw-in, gets the side up the pitch. Speaking again on Havertz, this moment when he rolled Bentancur, receiving in those false 9, number 10 type positions, was a really nice touch. Again, such completeness, such confidence, awareness, and there's that drive to his play now. And then lastly, I want to touch on Jorginho. For me, alongside Leandro Trossard, his performance was probably the most underrated. of the Arsenal team on Sunday, and watching the whole game back, I was simply astounded by his second ball play. We saw this a couple of times yesterday, where Jorginho would actually look to stack on top of Partey in the build-up to position himself more favourably to win the second ball situation when Raya launched it long, creating this 5 against 4 subtly with the Spurs back line, but also to help us set the press so we could be aggressive off the ball if we didn't secure that ball from Raya going long. And across the game, Jorginho, if you watch it again, if you have the time, just watch him. Watch how he anticipates and reads second balls. It's genuinely a joke, and it would be really unfair if he was blessed with genuine athleticism, because his levels of game intelligence are off the charts. But that is my full breakdown of Spurs 0, Arsenal 1, my tactical analysis of the game. I really, really hope you've enjoyed it. I really enjoyed going back through the game and talking it out with you. That is all from me today. I only ask you remember to like, comment, subscribe at the end of the video, because hopefully that means you found it enjoyable or informative in whichever shape, way or form you derive that from. But this win, I think, gives Arsenal a bit of energy, a spark back into their season when things, as we were saying before, were doom and gloom when they shouldn't, or they didn't need to be. And it also gives Arsenal the template, I think, with Declan Rice coming back as well, the template on the ball, that 4-2-4 going into the trip to the Etihad. But thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.